Hello and welcome to the Beatport podcast. My name is High Class Filter, and on today's show, I'll be talking to a veteran of the UK bass music scene, Plastician. Over the course of his career, Plastician's constantly pushed the boundaries of bass and electronic music, from his early days producing grime and dubstep, to his virtual reality platform Unreality Journeys, to his groundbreaking Terror Rhythm label, which has been responsible for early releases from the likes of Unit, Joker, and many more. Before we jump into the interview, I'm starting you off with a track from Plastician's overdue EP called Windwalker.
Beatport Podcast.
You're listening to the Beatport podcast with me, High Class Filter, and I'm joined now by Plastician. How's it going?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
So what's been happening? What's been going on in the world of Plastician?
A lot of time spent doing dad duties, actually. Spending a lot of time looking after the little at the moment, in between working on the label and trying to do some music myself, and like working in pirate studios on the artist side of things there as well. So it's mad busy, to be honest. Just squeeze gigs in here, there and everywhere as and when they come in as well.
So I saw you tweet recently that you felt your career up to this point has been kind of split up into 3 different phases, and that you're about to kind of enter phase 4. And I found it really kind of interesting that you described it in that way. Can you tell me what you see as being those 3 phases of your career so far, and what you think phase 4 is going to be like?
I think when I kind of started out, not a lot of people will know this, but I was sort of playing UK garage and stuff on pirate radio stations under a different name. I really wanted to kind of establish myself in that garage scene, but it was a bit hard to get into it. So when grime came around and I started producing that kind of stuff, I guess that was kind of the first phase, really, like making grime and early dubstep stuff. And when I kind of initially joined Rinse FM in 2003, playing at Forward, all those kind of events around that time. That was kind of like the first phase of my career. And then I think that the second one was probably about 10 years on from that, when I sort of, about 2012 maybe, started filtering more tempos into what I was doing on the radio, and was playing a lot of that kind of like SoundCloud, what then turned into like future beats, which was never really what I thought I was playing at the time, but you know, it probably had like a 6-month like period of pretty decent stuff. So that was a small phase, but it was very different to what I was playing in that first phase. And then I'd say like there was a predominantly wave kind of influence my sound from around 2014 maybe, I'd say. Like it started filtering in towards the end of 2013 with a lot of that beat scene kind of stuff, but it really kind of came into shape 2014, 15, I'd say. And then I'd say like for the last sort of 3 or 4 years, a lot of the stuff I had been doing on the radio up to the time I left Rinse in a couple of years ago was predominantly that wavy kind of sound, and like a lot of ethereal kind of chilled out beats and bass music, and that would have been like the third phase. So I think the fourth phase I'm not too sure what it will be at the moment, to be honest. I feel like I listen to a lot of different kinds of music, so if I'm given the opportunity to just play freely at the moment, I don't fully know what that's going to sound like yet, but I listen to a lot of electro, a lot of like left field electronica, even like some kind of like deep techno, UK techno. I think like my focus is shifting a little bit more to the club end of things, because for so long I've been fully focused in doing this kind of like chilled out, relaxed, wavy kind of stuff. Now it's like, right, that's been great, but like part of me is just like ready to play some more sort of like DJ oriented club music, stuff that's a bit more built to be mixed in a club, you know, with like more kind of structure to it. Yeah, I've been finding that quite fun, just messing around with stuff like that at the moment, just long blends and choppy mixes, and just like trying to fit all of these styles in together. So I feel like I don't know exactly like what it will sound like just yet, but I do think it might be a little bit more dancey, a bit more club focused.
Yeah, eventually all those different styles will kind of evolve into one kind of new style, you think?
Yeah, that's what happened with the whole wavy kind of stuff. I think like it was just I was playing bits of that, and that was the stuff that I liked more. So I was finding more and more stuff like that fit in between all the other stuff that I liked. And then eventually, you know, you start getting stuff like that sounds like that, but is at like 140, and then suddenly I can start mixing the grime and dubstep stuff that I'm still playing into it as well. So it's kind of like that really, just trying to find enough music to build up a catalogue that's big enough that you can kind of select through all these different styles without it sounding too disjointed.
I saw as well earlier this year you launched your All the Right Moves project, playing kind of 80s and disco music. What's your relationship with that kind of music? Is that something that you grew up on, or is it something that you've discovered more recently?
A bit of both really. It was always kind of like, I grew up obviously in the 80s. I was born in the early 80s, and so I kind of like had that music on the radio, but you know, this is like pre-internet. A lot of the stuff that you heard on the radio back then, you had no idea what it was unless you caught at the end of the song the mentioning what it was. And I used to do like the Christmas special on Rinse, and I'd play like 80s classics and make it fun. And I was doing that for a few years, and yeah, just got like a few gigs, got offered off the back of that. And those gigs turned into slightly bigger gigs, did Festival, played a set there on a stage that got recorded. The recording of that went up, and there was a lot of eyes on it, and we started getting hit up. My agent started getting hit up from other promoters who like heard what that set sounded like and thought that'd be pretty cool for the night they were running. So then it just turned into like getting more sort of like legit bookings in that scene, and I was like, well, I can't turn up and just play a set full of like, you know, sing-along bangers or classics. Like now I need to kind of step my game up a bit. So I just started digging around like I would for new music, but just like more old stuff. Not just old stuff, like some of it's new as well, but yeah, for the most part, it's like old, trying to find old, rare disco records, listening to old sets that were recorded in the 70s and 80s to try and find stuff that you can't buy online, you know, like really do some proper digging, make contacts with people in the disco circuit. So yeah, the All the Right Moves project was just trying to separate that, because I feel like I've been doing that now for like 4 years as like Plastician disco set, and it's like, there's enough to it now that it could be its own thing. So I think like backing that up with some edits and hopefully some more original stuff as well, we'll start to like break that away from the Plastician brand and let it be its own thing, because it doesn't make much sense next to all of the stuff that I release on Terrorism or produce as an artist myself.
So you mentioned there that when you first started out, you were playing garage. And I also remember hearing you say in an interview before that garage you found to be like quite a closed off scene. It was quite hard to get like a foot in the door when you were trying to DJ garage and make garage. So what was that like when you first started producing and DJing? Like how did things go from that closed off garage scene into, you know, making the 140 and the grime and the dubstep stuff?
So I think like I've been playing garage for, let me think, maybe about 2 or 3 years by the time that I started making stuff. And so yeah, I think like it was just like kind of came into garage as a fan, and then got a set of decks and started buying records and learned how to mix and stuff like that, and that kind of shifted into getting onto pirate radio. But in terms of how hard it was to just produce records back then, you know, there was no FL Studio, there was no Ableton, there was nothing like that on the market. So unless you had like hardware and knew your way around an actual studio, you couldn't realistically make a garage record. I had a few friends that kind of had Cubase and knew their way around it a little bit, but they were extremely limited to what sounds they could get their hands on. It was hard to get sample packs. The only place you could get sample packs back then were kind of like those front cover CDs of like Computer Music magazine and stuff like that. So it was just like nigh on impossible to just have a go at production. And obviously being a producer is always the easiest way to get your foot into the door of any scene. And it was a similar thing for me with grime, really. It was just playing like dark garage and two-step on the radio, and then hearing tunes like Pulse X, and I was like, who made this? Like, I could probably have a go at something like that. And that was it. I got, around the time that was getting played on dub, I managed to get hold of a like cracked copy of Fruity Loops and just started messing around with the sort of like built-in sounds that are on that. And just kind of like messing around with it, learning how to put things in patterns, and actually learned a lot about DJing while messing around with that. I started to notice that songs were in certain patterns and all this kind of stuff that I'd pretty much taught myself up to that point. So I learned a lot more about DJing when I started having to go at production as well. And I think probably after maybe messing around for about a year, I had built a track that I thought was good enough to send to DJs, and that was a track called Venom, which I sent to Slimzy to see if he would play it. He was one of the few DJs that was playing dub plates at the time. So I figured if someone was going to potentially play a song that is not available anywhere else, it was him, and he picked it up, and then he signed it as well. So that was like my foot in the door, and I knew that producing was going to get, I wanted to be on Rinse. I was listening to Rinse from South London, sat in my mum and dad's house holding the aerial in my hand, like to try and get the signal, and listening to the quality on that station of like what turned into the early grime sound. Like then it was still garage to me, what I was listening to, like Pay As You Go Cartel and like the beginnings of Roll Deep and all that kind of stuff, like Nasty Crew. All those crews I was listening to was like, yeah, this is kind of the sound that I wanted to do. So hearing Slimzy on a Sunday afternoon, that was it. I was like hearing other DJs that weren't that great on the station. I won't name any names, but some of them I noticed were like not good. And I heard one on the radio and I was like, oh, that's that guy who's got that tune out in the stores. Maybe if I get a tune in the stores, I'll get a show on Rinse. And that was what drove me into production, really. It was like, right, you could make something that sounds a bit like Pulse X. Just have a go at that. And like I said, after about a year, I kind of got close enough that I felt ready to send it out to Slimzy, and he picked it up, and that was it. Got a show on Rinse shortly after that. The rest is history.
So you were doing your radio show on Rinse weekly for a long time. And then when you stopped doing your radio show regularly, I remember you saying that part of the reason for that was that you felt like you weren't reaping the rewards as much as you'd hoped for the amount of work you were putting into the show. So we're in a time now where there's so much amazing radio out there, podcasts, live streams, so many great platforms for people to get their music out there and get it heard. Do you feel like there's a danger now for DJs, artists, producers to get kind of caught in a cycle of creating content for the sake of creating content, kind of without getting the returns that they deserve?
I think radio is really good for like promoting yourself. So I think it's definitely like, I feel like it's more useful still for like up and coming people trying to establish themselves within the industry, because the industry is always looking for like the next big thing or the next this or the next that. And I will never be the next thing because I've been on the radio for 14 years. Like, it would literally take me putting a mask on every week and hiding my voice and going back onto the radio and starting a completely new A-list to be that person. So I think part of it was just that, noticing that there was always this extreme focus on trying to find the next thing. And even though my show was doing great numbers and, you know, was being like heralded globally as like this space to listen to all this new music that no one else is really supporting on the radio, like artists who've never even, you know, some of these artists I was playing on the radio didn't even have a song on their SoundCloud page and stuff. Like, they just sent it to me privately. So it was good in that sense, but with all that good talk and all of the stats that are clear for everyone to see, it was just like, right, well, who's actually going to book me to play this in a club? And we lost a shitload of the small clubs in the UK around that time as well. So a lot of those kind of midweek shows that you'd have played to like be given free rein to like test all of the new music out on a decent sound system and introduce like heads to new producers and new sounds and styles, we were just losing spaces like that left, right and centre. So we were just left with festivals and promoters who promote enormous nights on the weekends. And, you know, them promoters need to sell tickets, and to sell tickets they need to be booking the big tech house DJs or the big techno players, or, you know, the kind of surefire sellers like household names in drum and bass and stuff like that. And it's like, I had no place in any of those venues or spaces, and it was becoming increasingly more difficult to even kind of like get my own foot in the door to do those things. Like, getting my foot in the door actually was easy, but the expectation for me to like pull in big numbers when I was just trying to like build a platform for new acts and put on some DJs for like their first ever gigs and stuff like that, no one had the patience for it. So, you know, you'd get 2 or 3 nights of a venue and they'd be like, yeah, we really like what you're trying to do here, but like, we need to sell tickets, so we're going to have to move this to like a Wednesday night. You know, when we brought you in, we thought you were going to be bringing through all, you know, like all these legends, and that wasn't actually what I wanted to do at all. And I made that pretty clear from the start. So that was a little bit demoralizing in the sense that I couldn't even really be offered the time or the patience of the industry, and there were no promoters around really doing it. And like, with all due respect to Rinse, I wasn't really at the top of their to-do list when it came to putting lineups together for anything they were doing at that time. You know, they were focusing their eyes a little more on the new up-and-coming DJs, which I think is kind of fair enough as well. Like I said, radio's a great platform for focusing on new talent, and when you've been on the radio for 14 years, that's not you anymore. So I think just like admitting that to myself and realising that you're not earning any money doing this, you're kind of slogging yourself into the ground for what? Some respect from like these up and coming producers, which is great, but that's not paying the bills. Like, you may as well go and focus that time into doing something for yourself rather than for the benefit of like the radio station maybe.
So you mentioned we've seen in the UK, we've lost a lot of venues in the last 10, 15 years, let's say. What effect do you think that will have on the underground electronic music scene? You know, in terms of people having those spaces to kind of, as you say, experiment, and kind of having promoters like take chances on them?
I think unless like the government step in and realise that there's an actual gap that's being left, but I don't think they do, because I don't think they understand why people go out late at night anyway. They're so far removed from like normal life. So there's that part of it, but also just the expense of like running a venue in London and the risk financially that takes. Like, no one really personally wants to take that on. When I started out, there was like promoters in every city who were just, you know, university students thinking it might be a cool way to make some money, and have a good time at the same time. And I don't see that anymore. There's hardly any of them. If they are, they're not booking bass music. They're probably booking techno. But from my personal experience, I haven't really worked with a promoter like that in a long time. So, you start losing those youthful promoters that are trying to like cut their teeth in the industry. You're just left with the big players. And, that for me pretty much signals the fact that you're going to see less things happening in the major cities as everything's going to get pushed out to the suburbs. And it's going to be more of a festival circuit, which we're already seeing, to be fair. A lot of people don't go out on weekends. They just, save up for a big festival. Like every few months, they'll go to a festival, or, they'll do a couple of big ones in the summer. Or they might go abroad to like a hideout or Outlook festival or something like that and make a holiday of. So they just don't go to like the small club nights on the weekends and just be surprised by what they might hear. It's not enough for these people anymore because they don't have the disposable income. London's an expensive city to live in, as are most major cities in the UK at least. So I think things are going to get pushed more underground. We're starting to sort of see little underground things pop up, bespoke kind of one-off events in warehouses out of town. But then we have these enormous warehouses like Printworks and that new one that they've just purchased as well, that ridiculously big like warehouse. So everything's just going to end up back in warehouses until the government want to crack down on that, because they don't want it anywhere near any residential right now. That's something we're not going to see. So I think a lot of major towns and cities are just going to see all sort of like late night clubbing put to a stop in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So anything like that wants to go beyond 3 o'clock in the morning is going to be out of town, out of the way, on an industrial site somewhere. And they might look into improving travel links in and out of those sites. But I think that's kind of where we're headed with it at the moment. That looks to me like the most sensible option.
And do you think that will necessarily have a huge effect on the kind of music that's being produced? Because obviously London's got such a rich kind of history of, like, let's say jungle to garage to grime to dubstep, obviously nurtured in kind of like seminal club nights. Do you think that will mean that scenes will be a bit less focused on a particular location? Let's say that people are swapping tunes over SoundCloud, for example, rather than nurturing those sounds in clubs.
I think there's still a few sort of small venues that do it right. They're about, just having a small space that people can be a little bit more experimental in. So there will be a few popping up, I'm sure. So I wouldn't put it out of the way 100%, but I do think the chances of London being like the city that unearths the next scene are thinning rapidly, just because we're losing a lot of those spaces. And none of these scenes walk into a 5,000 capacity room. Like, they start in a small basement somewhere with like 100 capacity and maybe 30 people turning up for the first 6 to 12 months. Do you know what I mean? Not many people are offered that patience that we used to have at like clubs like Plastic. People are like, a lot of people that didn't go to Forward read about it and have this preconception of what it might be. But Forward for years was about 30 people in a dark room that all knew each other, like once a month turning up to hear their mates play their tunes on a big system. And and I'm sure the same went for clubs like the Blue Note and Metalheads and stuff like that. All of those things start with a small community of people, friends and friends of friends, who just turn up for a party. And we're seeing a few things like that kind of bubble up a little bit on the underground at the moment, but nothing like is really taking shape because nothing's offered that time. And that's it. Like, these things take time to turn into a genre that everyone's talking about, and like the kind of genre that gets recognized by, say, like a Beatport or something like that. To get to that stage where like your genre is recognized in record stores that takes years, and I just can't see how anyone's being afforded that time at the moment. So unless someone has a space they can work in themselves and run themselves, or gets in there with someone who is as into the music as they are and is willing to accept that it's going to take time. So I think London just like is a slim chance that it's going to happen there. It's more likely to happen in a city where the rent's a bit cheaper.
I also wanted to ask you about your Unreality Journeys project, which I found really interesting at the time. It was after you stopped doing radio. So how did that kind of come about? And do you think that there's going to be a space for kind of virtual reality? Do you think that's something that we'll see like growing more and more within music culture and DJ culture?
So I kind of stumbled across it by chance at the time. I'd already announced I was leaving Rinse, and I had no plans to do anything at that moment until I saw this live stream that the guy, Alex, who became my business partner, was doing, where he basically had a 360-degree sort of live video on Facebook that had like characters dancing around to like vaporwave music, and the comments were popping up in real time in the environment, and he was interacting with the viewers in the comments, and people were trying to comment more and more to get their comments in the stream, because they were tagging their friends in like, look, come and hang out, this is crazy. So for years I think radio like lost that interactive end of things. Like doing pirate radio, you only knew if anyone was listening if your phone line was ringing off in the studio. And then when it became that kind of on-demand culture, podcasts are going up on SoundCloud, people are not really listening in when your show's on, they're just going to listen back to it in the week. So the comments would pop off on SoundCloud through the week and not while you're actually on air. So the live element of radio was just wearing thin for me a little bit until I saw that, and I was like, if we could put live DJs into that kind of environment and people can interact with the DJ, that's going to make live radio a thing again, where people want to lock in and feel like they're a part of the show. Because as much as the music's there, the people getting involved in the chat and stuff, their faces are popping up in the video, and that's there forever. That's like a visual shout out on a radio show, which I'd never seen before. And I was like, this is sick. This is like, if I was a kid listening to pirate radio and I was sitting there with my tape on, trying to wait for the MC to shout me out so I can show my mates at college, like, look, I got a shout out on Delight FM. That was like the same kind of buzz. I was like, these people are tagging their friends in. Their friends are like in the chat saying this is insane. So yeah, we just like got chatting to the guy that was doing that. And I was like, can't I live stream audio into that? And you can then put that in the environment and I can interact like vocally as well. And he was like, that sounds sick. So we started doing that. We built an app where people could literally land in the app as a character, walk around, fly around. The live stream was inside the app, and we could then stream out of the app onto Facebook, so like general public could also interact, but people who had the app on their phone could literally control their character walking around in the live stream, a bit like watching a virtual reality boiler room. Like you could stand behind the DJ if you wanted to on the live stream. So we were building rooms that were going to like host DJs with green screen, so we could literally green out the DJ and put them in like this 3D environment. It was pretty wild and out there, but it was accessible to everyone. We got loads of messages from people who were like, I don't like leaving my house. This is like the closest thing to a clubbing experience I've ever had. Like, thank you. We used to get so many nice messages from people that, maybe didn't feel like that included in like the clubbing like ecosphere, if you like. And that kind of drove us to realize that actually this is where VR is going to fit into the clubbing climate. It's going to make it accessible for all. People who have like chronic anxiety can still get involved in a chat. People who, people who don't have access to like clubs, clubs that don't have ramps for wheelchairs, loads of things. Like it literally made it accessible for all. People of all ages, like, do you know what I mean? It was like, it's quite wholesome. So that was kind of the beauty of it, and I think that was why there was so much interest in what we were doing from investors. And unfortunately, just a sad turn of events really. Had an argument with my business partner which just wasn't resolved. It disappeared extremely quickly, and yeah, it's sad because like we'll never know how great that might have been, but it could have also been like an absolute disaster.
So you mentioned earlier you've started working with Pirate Studios recently as well. So they're doing some really great stuff in terms of like developing young talent, young artists. So can you tell me a bit about some of the projects you've been working on over there? So
one of the big ones we recently did was the Pirate Prodigy campaign, which was like a massive talent search. We had like close to 5,000 or maybe just over actually entrants across 3 categories. So there was a band category, a DJ category, and an MC vocalist category. And yeah, I kind of oversaw the DJ and the MC vocalist category. I was also heavily involved in that as well. just literally sifting through thousands of entries, trying to find artists that we believed we could like help into the industry a bit. You know, if they had something about them, in particular in the DJ, it was like, right, I'm kind of looking for a DJ that I could take to nearly any festival and go, stick this girl on the lineup, she's going to do this, this and this. Stick this guy on the lineup, I know he's going to smash it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so just trying to find one of those DJs who just like, you know, could play all night and play like an absolute massive set. In the end, we found Eclecticist, Trieste and Jay Carter. And I think that the three of those have got very bright futures ahead of them. In the MC vocalist category, we came up with FFSY though. She's a grime MC, super talented, super early in her journey, so there's going to be a lot of development on her. Going to be kind of helping her out, A&R and EP, help her set up her own record label. Lots of stuff that I know already, you know, just kind of mentor a little bit. A really talented young lad called Kyan from Cambridge, who is like a multi-instrumentalist. He produces his own music and sings. He's like just an all-rounder. And a guy called Deju VHS. He's kind of like a punky, somewhere like punk and rap, like almost like metal. It's quite interesting. He's got a really like cool aesthetic about him as well. You know, he's thought about his look, the whole branding thing. He's just a proper like, thinks like an artist already. So I'm interested to see how he does. And also a grime MC called Tommy B, who like has already been doing bits on the grime circuit. We're just going to be supporting him with like a lot of studio time, kind of open a few doors for him to get into like an agency, that kind of thing. You know, I think that's, everyone's got different things that they need at the end of the process. So it's more like we speak to them now and ask them like, in an ideal world, where do you want to be in 12 months time? And we're just going to try and support them through the next 12 months to get them to like tick off as many of these goals that they've kind of given us to focus on. So that's been a major part of my work at Pirate Studios for the last few months. I also do a lot of content with them, do a series called Plastician's Lab, which is like about electronic music, normally kind of in and around the studio or DJs. So yeah, it's wicked because like there's so much variation in my day-to-day there. Like I could be sat in a meeting talking about these live streams we want to do, but then an hour later could be sat there like helping hash out a design for a new DJ desk. Obviously the studios have got all these rooms at 24 hours available to all of the public, and soon will be like fully available for like live streaming direct to their Facebook pages. So it's just like decentralizing that kind of content for artists and trying to do it as automated as possible, so you can go in with like little or no knowledge of anything in there and just get on and have a go. And I think that's the beauty of it. Like I was lucky enough that friends and friends of friends had like decks that I could mess around with in someone's bedroom, but the cost of a set of CDJs and a mixer, like the chances of your mate like having a set of those in his house, unless like their brother or sister is like a pro DJ, you don't get your hands on that these days. We don't have like youth clubs and stuff, so Pirate Studios making that kind of equipment available to someone for pocket money is an absolute mastermind piece of business, and is also going to unlock the next generation of talent in the UK and beyond. So yeah, I'm super proud to be a part of what they're doing there.
So what else is coming up for you and for Terrorism for the rest of the year?
There's 4 releases actually slated at the moment. We've got the artwork and masters back for Vexy and Jato. We've both done like an original, and the two of them have then remixed each other. We've got a new Clacy Jones EP, which is pretty much tied up. We've got the art done, got pretty much all the masters done. We're just tweaking a couple of the tracks at the moment. That's likely to come out maybe like end of July. Have a debut from an artist called Tracksuit Goth, someone who's never released any music previously or even had any public. So super excited to see how that does. Been helping a little bit on the kind of like visual art direction on that, trying to help them think about like the long-term look of all their releases and stuff like that. So that's super exciting. It's kind of like classic dubstep-y sounds as well, so nice to be putting that kind of thing out through the label again. And an EP from On Hell, which is like somewhere between like IDM and bass music, beats, dubstep. It's like super interesting. On Hell's a great producer and person, so always keen to be putting his music out. Myself, production-wise, I've got some stuff in the pipeline with YGG. So just done that bit with Flowdown that came out recently. done some collabs with Placey Jones. Been working on a side project as well with Placey, which is completely like separate from anything either of us have done up to this point. We're just kind of shopping that to labels at the moment to see if it pricks the ears of anyone, but it wouldn't make sense on Terror Rhythm, so it will be separate from Placey and Plastician. It won't necessarily be completely secret, but I'm not going to say any more than that just for now until we've decided how we wish to go about that. But we're sat on about 15 tracks and we've been building for over a year now. Plastician wise, I'm going to the States next month as well. That'll be my last run of dates out there for a while because my visa expires in August, so a few dates in the States, constantly doing these disco gigs. Got some edits to put out on the All the Right Moves page as well real soon. Just lots going on, as always, just trying to put eggs in every basket.
Plastician, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much, man, and big up Beatport, long-time supporters of everything I've been doing and all the label stuff. So shout out Beatport for continuing to always innovate, support good music, and innovate in terms of, all of this stuff they're doing, the streaming straight into Serato, all of these DJ apps. I think it's going to be interesting to see where that all goes. So big up Beatport.
Beatport Podcast.
Big shout out to Plastician for coming on the show today. And if you liked any of the music you heard during the interview, go check out his label Terror Rhythm. For the rest of the show, I'll be getting into the mix with some of my favourite bass and dubstep releases of recent weeks, starting you off with a new track from Batu called Shiratani, out now on his label Time Dance.
want girl come defend me. Give me antics so me no want be friendly. Them girl a pants so me no talk no Frenchy. Thump in the belly if she want pretend yeah. No want me to week like a Wednesday. Me no idiot girl a no fenke. If a girl broke like a counter empty. Come to the big junk for the. Mother than me know the antenne. Any style where we sit down a fe girl correct. Do the good pan the rhythm and me no pan put it. Come me wine pan the body African man say. Me a glide pan it so I'm like boat and ferry. Look for them and them shit and it's like them no care. Cause them a kiss ass like motor set. And me a wreck body like a walk. Like say me a go take money. Like my bado. That's how me a get money. Me a the goat and me never have to make curry. It pop off if a girl try get funny. Me nah rap killer rhythm and I check no pay. But if you harm with your own I go get lucky. Nasty girl like Sean them I get the pay. Not in my class. My dear, sit on her body like it was a high tier. Me the bad girl so nobody I fear. Put in her feels like it was a night year. Let me have a toast with me friend of my peers. Me the make it quite clear. Them I get a buzz but it was a light year. Tell story even a woody right here. Me have a big head but a cocky idea. So shit up a bit disturbing the peace. I'm having a feast. I wanna run a rubber to eat. Like I'm a get and I'm a dead and I'ma leave them deceased. The good in the I'm a bust like I was flicking my beat. It's crunch time so I tell a fella bon appetit. I'm on my grind. I got everybody gritting the teeth. It's pants like what a fella we're underneath. You know I be keeping it free. And me a rip body like a walk. Like say me I go take money. Like my bado. That's how me I get money. Me a the goat and me never have to make curry. It pop off if a girl try get funny. Me nah rap killer rhythm and I check no pay. But if you harm with your own I go get lucky. Nasty girl like Sean them I get the pay. Not in my class. Him salute. Me never know style. Me a introduce. Nobody waste time. Me have things for do. And you know want smoke. I me pink load. See me on the road and them think me cute. Me make a man break like an interlude. Them gyal a fake. Them have things to prove. Yo scratch. Come here boy. Hey sir. Me want do you a little favor. Shake up me body like it was a shaver. Me a go on mad. Me a blow behavior. Climb up the body like a escalator. I am not a faker. He might give me high like a skyscraper. He might give me wine and I get a taster. He might have a strong spirit and me a the chaser. Like a walk. Like say me a go take money. Like my bado. That's how me a get bully. Me a the goat and me never have to make curry. It pop off if a girl try get funny. Me nah rap killer rhythm and I check no pay. But if you harm with your own I go get lucky. Nasty girl like Sean them I get the pay. Not in my class. Him salute. Me never know style. Me a introduce. Nobody waste time. Me have things to do. And you know want smoke. I me pink load. See me on the road and them think me cute. Me make a man break like an interlude. Me make a man break. Him salute. Me never know style. Me a introduce. Nobody waste time. Me have things to do. And you know want smoke. I me pink load. See me on the road and them think me cute. Me make a man break like an interlude. Me make a man break.
This is a new track from Tony Rocky Horror called Titania, taken from his self-titled EP out now on Manuka Records. is a killer release that also features remixes from the likes of Biome, Sepia, and Old Gold. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This has got to be a candidate for one of the heaviest tracks of 2019 so far. This is Alex Perez with Deep Six, taken from his amazing Last Rites EP.
Are we kill man back
That's all I got time for on today's show. I'm leaving you with a classic track from today's guest Plastician, from all the way back in 2007. This is called Intensive Snare, featuring Skepta.
Beatport Podcast.
Lighter. Are you stupid? Skepta and forward. Skepta. It's not you, it's me. Plastic man. Are you stupid? Blood. Are you stupid in the nose? Baseline in your nostril. Some chest plate business. More than grime. Rock your head top. Baseline. Meridian. Okay. Forward. Go on then. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. I'm gonna keep spitting till genius kicks me off rinse. Might see me with the Eastside Prince. Might see me in a blue car with tints. Might see this monkey in the ghetto with no trim, taking out the garbage. If I hear you chat breeze, I'll come to your ends and cause maximum carnage. Boy, better know this. My name's Joseph, my name's Skepta, my name's Junior. See, in school, man, I used to hit boys with a ruler. The English teacher tried to make me Hoover, but I'm a bad boy from Nigeria, not St. Lucia. Joseph, Junior, Adenuga, big lips, African hooter. Go on then. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hats, treble and the level I'm on, they wanna reach this. Cause when I touch mic, I'm the deepest. I'm the strongest, you're the weakest. I'm on the A-list, you're still struggling to get up on the C-list. I'll drop an MC into pieces. I'm a bad man, you're a penis. And your whole crew stink like feces. But now check the remix. You see the level I'm on, they wanna be on. Cause I'm a star and I shine like neon. Lyrically gun a man down like Leon. And you're a waste man, so there's a lot of things we can't agree on. You got a big tune, put me on. I'm on a bad man thing, what's he on? Drive to your house in a Ford Orion. Draw for the tool, go on then. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Skepta, Plastic Man, more than grime. The hi-hat, treble and bass. All tight of the crew know about up in the air. Skepta, picky afro. But you know what? If you paid your money to see me slew, get a refund and drive home safely. Or shut your mouth and stop crying like a baby. You want me to keep on slewing MCs till I'm 80? Nah, please don't hate me. I'm still gonna say draw for the tool. What you mean, you fool? Take off my jacket, God forgive me and all of the classics. Cause when you compare my bars to a mash, I spray like a Mac 10, not a deuce. I made that boy there beg for a truce. He wanted to clash me until I started hurling abuse. And then he realised there's no use. He just hung himself with his own noose. I hold the power like Zeus. And when I touch mic in a dance, all hell breaks loose. Go on then, let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass. Let me see your lighters in the air. Are you stupid in the face? Check the intensive snare. The hi-hat, treble and bass.